Tonight, a new strike threat as Canada's railways grind to a halt.
We got two groups, the union and the rail lines. I blame them both.
Ottawa pushes for a binding deal. The union pushes back, while billions of dollars worth of goods sit idle. The convention's complete. The race for the White House ramps up.
It's going to be a bumpy ride.
Can the Democrats maintain momentum? Grab-and-go baby food surges in popularity.
And when I'm in a rush, sometimes the pouches.
The new study finding it might not be as healthy as it looks.
From CBC News, this is The National with Christine Birak.
Thanks for joining us. Ian is away. Across the country, a scramble is underway to blunt the fallout from a railway labor dispute that's now poised to expand yet again. A day after lockouts led the federal government to push for binding arbitration, the Teamsters union served CN Rail with strike notice, saying its workers could walk off the job Monday morning. That as workers at Canadian Pacific Kansas City are already on the picket lines. Combined, their rail networks stretch coast to coast and all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. They move an incredible amount of goods, including agricultural products, and this is harvest season. As Aaron Collins explains, that has farmers deeply concerned.
It's crunch time on farms across Canada.
Cheapest source of protein in the world.
The annual race to get crops off fields and to market. But this harvest is stalled by a railway labor dispute.
So these are peas. Where were they supposed to be going?
They're supposed to go to probably India and China.
Now what happens?
Well, their ships are probably sitting on the port waiting for this shipment. They're supposed to go out tomorrow from our local terminal.
Farming, always a precarious business, facing an extra hurdle this year.
We are being held hostage because we got two groups, the union and the rail lines. I blame them both. They pick the worst time of year every time they try to do this stunt.
Ottawa has stepped in to bring the dispute to an end, pushing for binding arbitration, a move the union representing rail workers opposes.
The best way to have a contract is at the bargaining table. We don't believe to let a third party to decide what's going to be our working condition.
Workers at CPKC remain on strike. CN employees could soon follow suit after filing a 72-hour strike notice.
Unfortunately, the Teamsters are choosing a path of further confrontation and trying to shut Canada down again.
But even a forced settlement will take time, creating a backlog in the country's rail system, costing the Canadian economy hundreds of millions of dollars a day. That cost driving calls to prevent future rail shutdowns.
Transportation should be declared an essential services so that, there are more tools in the toolbox for governments in situations like these.
Back on the farm, the future is now. Worries that this year's rail disruption could have foreign customers thinking twice about buying Canadian crops.
They don't understand how we can't be a reliable country to deliver our products because of these kind of disputes.
An uncertainty that could make future harvests harder to pull off.
Aaron, even once any labor disruption ends, it can still take a while to get the rail system back to normal?
Yeah, that's right, Christine. This is going to take time, and with uncertainty looming over these negotiations, it's hard to know how long. That's because every day that rail traffic is disrupted, more and more shipments like these ones right behind me, they get backed up. So imagine Canada's rail network is like a pipeline. It's usually pretty full, right? So if there's a shutdown, there's a backlog. And even if the pipe can be filled up again, it takes a while to work through that backlog. So yeah, Christine, even once things are settled in this dispute, it could take weeks or even months to get back to normal.
Thanks, Aaron. Aaron Collins in Calgary. With so much uncertainty, some perishable goods are not being shipped, and prices to move goods by truck instead are on the rise. Susanna De Silva looks at what it could all mean for you.
The rail stoppage began hitting this logistics company hard well over a week before the trains actually stopped moving.
Working with our clients to divert their containers, look at solutions where we can move their containers away from the rail to avoid getting stuck.
But that isn't a simple process. For example, a container on a ship destined for Toronto would normally arrive in Vancouver and be put on a rail car. Now a truck has to be arranged to pick it up, a warehouse found to store it, and another truck hired to drive it across the country, with extra costs every step of the way.
The cost for transport has to come from somewhere, and the cost will ultimately trickle down to consumers.
And the expense is going up every day. What was $6,000 to $7,000 to truck it from Vancouver to Toronto, he says is now closer to $10,000.
The big guys may be able to truck this stuff in or fly it in, but it's not good for the small grocery stores.
Many consumer groups say the dispute will need to drag on a few more days before store shelves will start feeling emptier. But the question is the long-term effect.
They may come back with a higher price, which I'm scared of. And we're trying to keep prices as low as we can right now to just keep our customers coming back.
And uncertainty of when the rail will return to normal is adding to the challenge.
It's hard to know what to communicate because calling someone and just saying, I have no idea when you can get product is not a great phone call.
This flooring company has a shipment leaving Europe next week. They don't know if they should look at the much more expensive option of coming through the United States.
It's a huge impact financially for us, and if we have to go that route, we then have to pass that cost on to clients. Some of them may not be willing to go ahead with an order, and we may lose it altogether.
For now, all they can do is hope a resolution is found before it comes to that. Susanna Da Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
The race to the White House is officially underway as Kamala Harris officially accepted the nomination as candidate, capping off the Democratic National Convention. Katie Nicholson now looks ahead to what will be a fierce fight to the finish line.
The star-studded Democratic Convention hit all the right notes and ended in rapturous applause. But the days ahead for candidate Kamala Harris will be decidedly different than this 4-day cheerfest.
It's not going to be as friendly going forward.
The convention was a powerful launchpad. To keep the momentum going, the Democrats need to dive into the nuts and bolts.
Kamala Harris is really going to have to talk about policy. So she needs to put more of the meat on the skeleton of what she's talked about so far.
The Trump campaign also needs to elbow its way back into the spotlight. This week, VP pick J.D. Vance roundly mocked for a seeming inability to make small talk at a donut shop.
I'm J.D. Vance. I'm running for Vice President. Let's see it.
Okay. It's a lot of wall up there we built.
While the former president has been noticeably less energetic, even when addressing one of his favorite topics.
We're here today on the southern border in Arizona where Comrade Kamala Harris.
Well, the way that Donald Trump reinvigorates his base is by going out there and doing his big mega rallies.
But he says Trump will have to be disciplined, something that's proved challenging in the past.
He needs to get out and talk about his message and stay on message.
And as both campaigns find their footing in the final stretch, expect election integrity to again dominate the news cycle.
It's going to be a bumpy ride.
This expert says efforts are already underway to make it harder for voters.
People taking, steps to try to subvert the vote or the certification of the vote, and then on top of that, you put AI-generated, turbocharged misinformation and disinformation.
This election has already seen an assassination attempt, a high-profile withdrawal, and a dramatic surge in one party's fortunes, and it's only August. Perhaps the only thing that's certain, many more dramatic days ahead. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Washington.
A big change to the ballot in battleground states. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is suspending his independent U.S. presidential campaign and throwing his support behind Donald Trump. Chris Reyes looks at what that could mean for the race.
He once called Donald Trump an awful human being, and now RFK Jr. is taking his side.
I've made the heart-wrenching decision to suspend my campaign and to support President Trump.
In running as an independent and now endorsing Donald Trump, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has clearly broken ties with the party of his famous political family, even invoking his father and uncle in attacking the Democratic ticket.
they would be astonished to learn of a Democratic Party presidential nominee who, like Vice President Harris, has not appeared in a single interview or an unscripted encounter with voters for 35 days.
But his siblings called the endorsement a betrayal of values their father and family hold dear.
Let's go take back our country.
In suspending his campaign, RFK Jr. clears the path for a decidedly two-way race between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Polls show the two candidates separated by just a few percentage points.
And obviously, in a close election like this, you desperately need every vote you can get.
Trump confirming that with his approval of RFK's endorsement.
I want to thank Bobby. That was very nice. That was really very nice. That's big. He's a great guy, respected by everybody.
On that, many Democrats disagree, fueled by his vaccine skepticism and sometimes strange stories like dumping a dead bear cub in Central Park more than a decade ago.
I said, let's go put the bear in Central Park and we'll make it look like he got hit by a bike.
I actually think this is a larger liability for the Trump campaign because it kicks the weirdness factor up to 11.
RFK Jr. made it clear he's not dropping out of the race, but simply pulling his name out of the battleground states where he could be a spoiler candidate, someone who can alter the outcome of the election but not actually win. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
3 people are dead and at least 5 more seriously injured after a mass stabbing at a festival in Germany. The city of Solingen near Dusseldorf was beginning a 3-day celebration to mark its 650th anniversary. The attack is said to have happened in a central square where musicians were performing. Local media is reporting the suspect is on the run and a manhunt is underway. In Italy, divers recovered the final body from the wreckage of a sunken yacht. It's believed to be 18-year-old Hannah Lynch, the daughter of British tech magnate Mike Lynch, who also died. 15 of the 22 people aboard survived when the ship suddenly sank during an intense storm on Monday. The investigation is ongoing, but there are reports Italian prosecutors are considering manslaughter charges, though it's unclear who they'd be against. Later in the show, we'll take a closer look at how it all happened and how human error could have factored in. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is on a rare and politically charged visit to Ukraine, meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky. On the agenda, the war with Russia. As Briar Stewart reports, the Indian leader is trying to walk a fine line in his dealings with both sides.
The last time an Indian prime minister visited Ukraine, the country was part of the Soviet Union. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky described Narendra Modi's visit as historic and symbolic.
I think that India began to recognize that this is not just conflict, this real war of one man, and his name is Putin.
And that's who Modi visited last month. He warmly met with Russian President Vladimir Putin. A few hours after, a missile slammed into a children's hospital in Kyiv. Modi described the deaths of innocent children as heartbreaking, but didn't condemn the attack or the war, which led to criticism, including from Zelensky, who wrote that it was a devastating blow to peace efforts to see the leader of the world's largest democracy hug the world's most bloody criminal in Moscow. And that's perhaps why the Ukraine visit started here, a memorial to children killed during the war. The brief meetings included agreements promising cooperation, with Modi proclaiming that India isn't neutral, but on the side of peace. Both sides should sit together to find ways to end this crisis, he said.
And it is not likely to take a very proactive approach.
This senior research fellow says Modi is trying to balance relations with Russia, Ukraine, and the West. India is a big buyer of Russia's oil and weapons, which is one of the reasons it's unlikely to take the lead in any negotiations.
For India to take an active role in peacemaking, it would really require both parties to the conflict to urge India to do so.
But as both sides try and take more ground on the battlefield, there isn't a visible push for peace talks. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
A volcanic eruption sent hot lava and smoke shooting into the air in southwestern Iceland for the second straight day. The volcano was triggered by a series of earthquakes. This is the 6th eruption in the area since December. Before that, the volcano had been dormant for about 800 years. Back here in Canada, New Brunswick has declared a province-wide whooping cough outbreak as global cases of the highly contagious disease are rising.
And that is highly linked in time to decreasing rates of both boosters and the primary vaccines for whooping cough.
There are now 141 confirmed cases in New Brunswick. That's up from just 11 in June. Whooping cough is easily transmitted and is considered very serious for babies and young children, especially those who are too young to be fully immunized. A new study looking at baby food products finds many of them lacking in nutrition.
These foods are specifically for convenience compared to the foods you might make at home.
Why experts say health claims are often misleading. Next. Plus, the moments that led to the sinking of a super yacht.
And after the storm was over, we noticed that the ship behind us was gone.
We'll examine how it could have happened so fast. And later, a postcard from the past.
Obviously, the card was sent in August 1903.
Why it finally showed up more than 100 years late. We're back in 2. A rare sighting off the Florida coast. Double waterspouts. They were part of a thunderstorm system moving through the area. Waterspouts are essentially tornadoes over water instead of land. These ones were far enough away not to put anyone at risk.
What's wrong with it?
A bizarre moment at the Melbourne airport. A passenger was filmed walking onto the wing of the aircraft and then jumping off onto the tarmac. Passengers told media he pushed his way through the emergency exit as soon as the plane landed. Police took him into custody and say he is being assessed at a hospital. It can be one of the most challenging decisions parents make each and every day, what to feed their kids. Now, a new American study has found most baby foods don't meet nutrition standards set by the World Health Organization. Anand Ram explains why they may look healthier than they really are.
With toddlers, navigating the ups and downs can be challenging, especially when it comes to food.
I think when you're trying to sustain yourself every day and you're sleep deprived, we'll have fruit available, crackers, but also every now and then a pouch.
And when I'm in a rush, maybe I do the fruit pouches, yeah.
Grocery stores have a wall of options, both convenient and seemingly healthy.
These foods are specifically for convenience compared to the foods you might make at home.
A new study looked at more than 600 infant and toddler foods in U.S. grocery stores, comparing them to recent World Health Organization advice for Europe. It found nearly 2/3 didn't meet nutritional requirements, with generally too much sugar and fat and not enough protein. But also virtually none met the WHO standards for the types of claims put on packages, which prohibits the use of terms like non-GMO or no artificial colors.
Just because it has more claims does not mean it's a healthier product. And I think that's where a lot of consumers get stuck.
To be clear, claims like no sugar added are accurate, but experts warn they can create a glow of healthiness.
And we call that a halo effect, where they talk about some other positive attributes about their food so they don't have to talk about what I would call the negative or the high sugar level, for example.
The study also found that those popular pouches had high levels of sugar. Experts say these pouches could also affect children's motor development.
They don't know how to move their tongue or manage the textures, so they kind of just get stuck in that puree consistency.
Keeping up with kids can be hard enough, and convenience can feel necessary. But experts say reducing how many of these snack foods kids get regularly can still help. Anand Ram, CBC News, Toronto.
Since the pandemic, more Canadians have started lacing up their runners and hitting the streets. Paula Duhacek looks at what's making running so appealing to so many.
A few months ago, this was a small, intimate running group. Now, not so much.
We're really just here to move our bodies and meet new people, and I think maybe that's the culture of the way running is going now and why it's growing so fast.
Across the country, people are pounding the pavement in a big way. Marathons in Vancouver and Toronto selling out in record numbers. Calgary hosted its largest marathon in a decade.
Overall, it looks like participation's up about 16%, which is absolutely awesome considering it actually was on the downward spiral before the pandemic.
This isn't the first time running's had a moment.
It seems just about everybody is doing it these days, running around a gymnasium, a park, or the neighborhood streets.
Back in the 70s, Canadians discovered running and loved it.
I like nature. I like seeing people.
We chase ladies.
It's a sociable way to get some exercise.
Today's runners say they're also drawn to the social aspect.
It's the middle of the week. It's a good way to meet new people when you're new to the city.
Great people, great activity. Get outdoors, have some fun.
The blue labeled shoes are for feet that tend to roll to the inside of your ankle.
This running room manager says for many, running is a pandemic habit that's stuck around.
Gyms and pools were closed, that a lot of new people were coming to the sport, learning to run outside for the first time maybe and learning that they liked it.
Plus, amid the high cost of living, it's one way to get a workout without breaking the bank.
It's just running, like all I need is a pair of running shoes. I already got that. I don't have to pay for a gym membership.
Workout trends tend to come and go, and it's not clear whether the boom will fizzle or flourish. But this running group has no plans of slowing down. Paula Duhacek, CBC News, Calgary.
A BC company is experimenting with the stuff we flush down the toilet to help in the process of creating an important source of energy.
It harvests that energy in a very cost-effective way.
Why not everyone thinks it's good for the planet? Plus, growing older on their own terms.
As people age, they want to continue to be able to live their lives as they have.
We'll look at some different ways older Canadians are aging in place. And how did a super yacht sink so fast off the coast of Sicily?
They just happened to be anchored at the wrong spot and got hit with a direct hit.
The National breaks down the stories shaping our world next. A gust of wind sent a trampoline flying over a house in Alabama. You can see it there bouncing off the roof and then falling into the front yard. The scene was captured on a doorbell camera. It appears no one was injured. A Metro Vancouver sewage plant is pushing the limits of waste recovery. They've patented a new process to extract higher levels of biogas from the stuff we flush down the toilet. Yvette Brend shows us the potential benefits.
What's flushed down here is seen by most as waste, but a team of engineers and microbiologists in BC are working to change that. Microbes in this unit at the Lulu Island Sewage Treatment Facility are helping. Researchers have been seeding the tanks of this contraption with communities of microbes to increase the amount of biogas they can extract.
So the bioreactor that we're working on is essentially a vessel where we will cultivate the right microbes, the kinds of microbes that produce methane, which is the usable part of biogas that can be used as renewable natural gas. So we're creating the right environment for them to grow and thrive.
They had so much success they patented the process. Now they're taking it into the pilot phase.
If we could make it happen, then we can help solve climate problems.
Excess gas once flared or burned off is now captured, enough methane to fuel 650 homes.
We're capturing it, we're cleaning it up, and in combustion it turns into CO2. So we're reducing the risk of that potent methane being released to the atmosphere.
That's also creating $1 million in revenue a year.
And I think it's important because it harvests that energy in a very cost-effective way compared to some of the other kind of energy on the horizon.
But critics question this as a climate change solution.
Well, essentially, they are manufacturing one of the most powerful greenhouse gases, right? Methane.
Then there's the cost, potentially tens of millions to install the system at 180 sites across the country.
Industry can drive climate solutions, absolutely, but it has to do it in an affordable, reliable, and justifiable way.
But this microbiologist says it's a step in the right direction.
We need to redefine how we think of waste, right? So these are wastewater treatment plants
operationally, but we'd like to think of them in the future as waste resource recovery facilities.
And wastewater as something much more than just flushable. Yvette Bren, CBC News, Vancouver.
Now let's break down the news shaping our world. The bodies of all 7 people missing after a luxury yacht sank off the coast of Sicily have now been recovered. But questions remain about how the vessel went down.
I saw flashes of lightning, and I didn't like the look of the sky.
And why it happened so fast.
If you break that hull and water enters, it can go down very quickly.
About that, Lauren Berg breaks down what we know so far and whether the tragedy could have been prevented.
Just a few days ago, British tech billionaire Mike Lynch was in Sicily, celebrating a big win. 2 months earlier, he'd been staring down the possibility of 25 years in prison on fraud charges in the US. But after his 13-year legal battle ended with his acquittal, he and his 11 guests boarded a $40 million super yacht, only to end up anchored in the wrong place at the wrong time.
A yacht carrying mostly British people was caught in a tornado.
According to survivors, sank in a matter of minutes.
And after the storm was over, we noticed that the ship behind us was gone.
15 people managed to escape the yacht, but Lynch, his daughter Hannah, and 5 others never made it out. The investigation into what happened is only just beginning. So there's still a lot we don't know. But to many watching this story, it's alarming how fast the vessel sank.
This thing went down quickly.
It's highly likely that given the fact that this yacht capsized and then sunk, that it actually had a direct hit.
As more information comes out, there are growing questions about how this happened and whether there's anything that could have been done to prevent it. The night before the Bayesian sank, it was anchored in a harbor near the village of Porticello, 300 meters from shore. Here's a picture of it, posted on Facebook and verified by Reuters, taken that night at around 10 p.m. You can see the 75-meter mast all lit up, and the sky and the water look calm. But it had been really hot in this part of Italy for weeks, and the temperature of the Mediterranean Sea was almost 3 degrees higher than normal. Extra heat like that increases the energy in the water and the chance of extreme weather. We know from the Italian Department of Civil Protection that strong thunderstorms were forecast over parts of Sicily through the weekend, and that they turned violent overnight in Porticello. You can see here CCTV footage captured intense wind and rain, blowing furniture over at a nearby restaurant. Locals in the town said the winds felt like an earthquake, and they said they saw a waterspout, which looked something like this, a violently rotating column of air, similar to a tornado.
At around 4 o'clock, the waterspouts hit the town. 15 minutes later, we saw a flare in the sea. Once the waterspout had passed, we went out to inspect. All we saw were cushions and the rest of the boat, which had sunk.
Now, it's not clear if the Bayesian was hit by a waterspout or if it was a downburst. This happens when heavy rain gathers overhead and the system weakens, unleashing a violent wall of wind and rain. Their wind speeds can be as strong as a tornado, more than 160 kilometers an hour.
They just happened to be anchored at the wrong spot and got hit with a direct hit.
A CCTV camera actually captured the yacht disappearing. If you look closely, the video shows the mast lights disappearing on the ship as it sank. Experts we spoke with say those extreme winds may have caused critical damage to the hull.
But if you break that hull and water enters, it can go down very quickly. So I'm going to guess that they're going to find a crack in the hull caused by the damage of the storm picking up and moving this yacht.
In case you're not super familiar with ship terminology, the hull is like the outer shell that keeps water out and protects the internal structure. If the Bayesian was in the direct path of a waterspout, it's possible it could be pulled upwards in the direction of the wind. That pressure could be enough to create a crack somewhere in the middle of the ship's hull, and water would gush in quickly. Some of the survivors reportedly said that in the moments leading up to the crash, they had felt as if the ship was being lifted, and then suddenly dropped, and that objects from the cabins fell on them.
A large section of this thing could have been picked up, at least a section of it, and split open, and the water just would just roll into it.
The Bayesian also had one of the tallest aluminum masts in the world at a height of 75 meters.
Depending on how it's sitting in the water, you push real hard on that mast,
and nothing else with a mast that high around it, that thing with the tall mast might just get pushed over.
Divers have said that the yacht is currently lying on its side in the seabed in one piece. And while we don't yet know for sure if the mast played a direct role in the sinking, experts we spoke to say it could be a factor.
It would be a calculus in the evaluation of how quickly or how fast the vessel would tip over.
While investigators continue to gather information about how this could have happened, there are also questions about preparedness. The CEO of the company that built the Bayesian has been quoted suggesting the tragedy is linked to a series of human errors, saying the yacht was, quote, one of the safest boats in the world, that it was, in his words, basically unsinkable.
Questo episodio sa di una storia incredibile, sia tecnicamente che come fatto.
He says in a storm situation, the boat should have been in full alert mode. Anchor pulled up, vessel positioned towards the waves, all the hatches closed, and guests and crew in one safe area. But of course, this wasn't your average storm.
This wasn't like a large storm coming through. This wasn't heavy seas or waves where you might take a protocol of, lifting anchor and turning bow into the waves. This was, I'm going to say, relatively fast event of a tornado. No different than what we have on land.
Everyone knew about the storm. And then, if a fisherman knew, why was the captain of such a ship of such importance, with guests of such level and importance, with 12 guests on board, why wasn't he in an alert situation?
But the more details emerge, the more likely it seems the guests were thrown into the chaos with very little warning. We know that at least one of the survivors said she was asleep on deck when the extreme weather hit. And then suddenly it was dark, and she found herself in the water in just a few minutes. And some of the missing passengers who were later recovered were found in their cabins.
Divers assisted by robots located 5 bodies inside the Bayesian. 2 were found between mattresses in one of 6 guest bedrooms.
These things do strike more or less without warning, and there is very little time, if any, to take preventative action.
Even if a storm alert went out, to predict a waterspout or a downburst that might strike your vessel, experts say that's nearly impossible. It comes out of nowhere.
You're talking about potentially 80, 90, 100 mile an hour winds circulating. It is like a train crash.
There are also theories around whether the crew shut all the doors and hatches, a protocol that should have been followed in the event of a storm. According to Italian media, divers who carried out underwater inspections of the boat reported that a hatch was open. If this was the case, water could have entered through the gap, flooding the vessel. But there's also the impact of the storm to consider.
I can't say again that these hatches weren't battened and maybe just opened up when the thing was lifted.
Considering how quickly this all happened, it's pretty astonishing that 15 people survived, including a 1-year-old girl. 7 people tragically lost their lives. Michael Lynch and his 18-year-old daughter, Hannah, Morgan Stanley executive Jonathan Bloomer and his wife, Judy, a charity trustee, Chris Morvillo and his wife, Nita, and Canadian Ricaldo Thomas, who was the ship's chef. Investigators have now shifted their focus to understanding what happened to the Bayesian that night. And Christine, we may even see charges laid in the future, as they try and figure out just what went wrong.
Thanks, Lauren. You can watch more from the team at About That, including their breakdown of the CP and CN rail disruptions. That's available on CBC News Explore or stream it on CBC Gem. Coming up, Canada's population is aging and more people are looking for ways to stay in their homes as they get older.
People are better supported and feel healthier in their homes where they've said they want to be.
We'll break down the creative ways some are making it work next. More seniors are hoping to avoid living in long-term care.
As people age, they want to continue to be able to live their lives as they have.
And they're finding ways to grow older on their own terms.
You have your independence. Your independence means so much to everyone.
From sharing a home to creating a community, what it could look like to age in place. Earlier this year, I looked at why these options are becoming increasingly popular. Never before has the number of people nearing retirement been so high. By 2030, almost a quarter of Canadians will be over 65. Since the pandemic, surveys show 96% of older adults would do everything they can to avoid living in institutions. Many are afraid of long-term care, and vacancies are up in expensive retirement homes too. What most older adults say they want is to age in place, but they've got either too much house or too little support. So what is aging in place, and what are some ways to make it work?
As people age, they want to continue to be able to live their lives as they have. And so aging in place is a part of that, living in the community that they know, having access to services and supports in their neighborhood.
One way of doing that is co-living, friends or acquaintances buying a house together. In 2018, we met London, Ontario's Golden Girls. Phyllis, Barb, and Mary pooled their money to buy this house. 5 years on, we wanted to ask, how's it going? Turns out, Mary's leaving to go help out her family.
Hello.
Hi, Phyllis?
Yes.
Christine,
Come on in.
Nice to meet you. Co-living isn't something Barb Coughlin and Phyllis Brady ever imagined when they were younger. Now in their 70s,
When somebody says, Barb, supper's ready. Oh, good.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. Oh.
I paid way more in rent than I pay per month now to be here.
Imagine that.
That was just rent. That wasn't anything else. Shows where the money goes. So
they share all food and home expenses. Receipts go in the bowl.
at the end of each month, we have a finance meeting.
Cleaning and daily cooking duties all shared too.
Who's the best cook?
Oh, I'm not going to answer that.
It's all very cordial, well organized, and caring.
So the questions people ask are, what do you do when you're feeling grumpy, or how do you manage when you have a fight?
The answer? You have to be flexible.
It's important to cooperate, to listen to what other people are saying, and try to find a solution.
Of course, co-living isn't for everyone. Another idea Canadians are exploring to help them age in place is called NORC, Naturally Occurring Retirement Communities. Instead of moving, NORC programs bring services to buildings or neighborhoods where already 30% or more of the residents are older adults. So let's go check one out.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
About 70% of the residents living in this Toronto building are over 65. During the pandemic, the Birthday Girl reached out to UHN, a hospital network, to ask about their fledgling NORC program. Christine Doyle moved here decades ago. At 84, she lives on her own with a little help.
NORC says, what do you need in your building? Not what we can give you, but we'll find out what we can give you. But tell us what you need.
More social events, medical supports like foot care, paramedics visits, vaccine clinics, and exercise programs, all aided by NORC coordinators run by residents.
One of my favorite quotes from one of the residents is how this NORC program has turned a cold apartment building into a warm community.
Dr. Howard Abrams is director of UHN Open Lab that's researching and running the program. His team mapped out nearly 2,000 potential NORCs in Ontario alone, housing about 217,000 older adults. Research shows NORCs could also streamline publicly funded home care services. Personal support workers could spend less time driving and more time with clients.
People are better supported and feel healthier in their homes where they've said they want to be. They're not going to end up in emergency rooms as often.
Hello.
Hey, Mary.
Oh, come on in.
Mary Vigro says affordability has always been top of mind. Now 87, she lives alone, but she's not lonely.
Quite honestly, since Nork came, I have spoken to more people in the building.
When she fell and broke her hip inside her apartment, one of her neighbors noticed something was off.
I had not taken in my newspaper. I was sort of dehydrating. And so she got in touch with the custodian, and they opened the door, and fortunately, she saved my life.
With all the benefits and a silver wave looming, it's worth asking, why aren't there more Norks?
Evidence would suggest that it might be worthwhile to consider it.
McMaster professor Lori Letts leads research programs in this apartment building for a Nork group called Oasis. She co-authored a study that found Norks can create an opportunity for governments to support healthy aging in their communities. Letts adds Nork programs aren't costly to run, and they empower residents with a sense of purpose. June Southall says she never did an exercise class in her life until she was 88.
You have your independence. Your independence means so much to everyone, and you're able to have that.
I think you can't be stuck in the way you've always done things. You need to be open to, there's more than one way to do something.
While long-term care will be there for those requiring 24-hour care, many are working to age in place as long as they possibly can. Residents we spoke with said those naturally occurring retirement communities, or NORCs, can be the future of aging in place, but politicians need to get behind the idea to make them more common. Up next, a postcard arrives more than a century late.
There's no smudges, there's no cracks, there's no creases, there's no stains.
The delayed delivery in our moment. You're looking at a postcard from 1903, more than 120 years old, and still in good condition. It arrived late last week at a bank in the south of Wales in the UK. And with it came lots of questions, some answered, but not all. Tonight, the postcard from a bygone era makes our moment.
We get quite an abundance of mail on a daily basis, and within the mail that came in on Friday was a postcard, not something we'd usually get. It was actually to a Miss Lydia Davies, and it was 121 years old. It features a deer, a stag on a rocky mountainside. It's a black and white image. I think a lot of people are thinking it's Christmas based, but then that doesn't make sense because obviously the card was sent in August 1903. There's no smudges, there's no cracks, there's no creases, there's no stains. I'd love to know where it's been. The one big mystery that still hasn't been solved is how it ended up back at the address it was due to go to. From speaking to the archive and looking at photos from around the time, we actually believe Lydia's house was probably bombed in World War II. Our office was built in its place, and due to the proximity of where it was built, it retained the address. It still was 11 Craddock Street, and that's how it ended up with us. It's just been so nice to see the community pull together and give me all this information, to see everyone kind of get behind this amazing story.
Just showed up in the mail looking perfectly new. The working theory is that the postcard was in a box or used as a bookmark by someone, given how well kept it is. The plan now is to house the postcard in a local archive or a museum so it can be taken care of and others can check it out. For all of us here at The National, thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to The National's YouTube channel. I'm Christine Birak. Take care.